I didn't come to pray. I came to listen to a man lie in God's name. My daughter sat beside me, clutching her little girl's hand, trying not to tremble. When the pastor opened his mouth, I knew. He wasn't delivering a sermon. He was issuing a threat, and I was already counting the ways to answer it. The church was full, like it always was on Sundays. Old women in pressed floral dresses, young couples who still held hands like promises, and a few familiar faces that had buried enough secrets to know better than to look me in the eye. I sat in the back pew, right-hand side, same as always. Only this time my pulse was ticking louder than the organ. Emily hadn't wanted to come. I didn't blame her. But her daughter, sweet Ella, had asked if they could wear matching dresses to church. Emily didn't have the heart to say no, so here we were. Her shoulders were tense, her spine pulled straight like she was bracing for a fall. The service started like any other. Hymns, announcements, and a prayer that stretched too long. But then Pastor Delton took the pulpit. He was a tall man with a voice made for microphones and crowds, deep, resonant, trained. He smiled like a politician but moved like a prosecutor. And when he leaned into the mic, I felt it before I heard it. The sermon wasn't for the congregation. It was for her. There are those among us, he said, who defy the Lord's plan, women who abandon their sacred vows, who walk out on the structure God himself built, and they dare to sit here among the righteous. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. The pause after women was just long enough for the glances to shift. I felt the congregation tilt like a compass, every eye moving toward Emily. Even those who tried not to look gave themselves away. Silence always reveals more than speech. Emily's hand tightened around Ella's. I watched the little girl glance up at her mother, confused. My daughter didn't look back. She just stared at the stained glass window behind the pulpit like it could explain something that wasn't hers to answer for. I felt it then. Not just anger, but something older. Older than the pews, older than the pain. I'd spent 30 years in homicide, buried friends, cleaned blood off my hands that didn't belong to me. I thought I'd retired from justice. Apparently not. The pastor kept going. They divorce, they defy, they step out of line, and they think the Lord's house won't notice. His voice had that steady, righteous cadence, the kind that swelled and dipped, trained over years of funerals and baptisms and weekly judgment. But I didn't hear words anymore. I heard an engine warming up, something humming in my bones, like the start of a case file before the ink's even dry. Ella tugged on her mother's sleeve. Emily whispered something back. I didn't hear it. I was too busy watching Pastor Delton's hands. He gripped the pulpit like he was holding it back, like the fire he'd summoned in himself had nowhere to go but forward. Shame has a shape, he said, and sometimes it sits beside you. Sometimes it teaches your children. Sometimes it lives in your home. I didn't move. But inside, I was already unpacking my toolbox. Not the one in the garage. The one I'd used in courtrooms, interrogation rooms, and once on the side of a riverbank at midnight. This man wasn't speaking to God. He was speaking to power, and someone needed to answer. The rest of the sermon was a blur of scripture and spit. He closed his Bible with a theatrical snap, offered a thin smile, and gestured for the choir. As the first note of the final hymn rang out, I reached for Emily's hand. She looked at me, eyes wide, a flicker of apology in her expression. But I didn't want her apology. I wanted names, records, weaknesses. She didn't need to say it. I could see the question in her eyes. What are you going to do? I gave her the smallest nod. Start something that won't be forgiven. The choir sang loud enough to mask most things, but not my thoughts, not the dull throb in my jaw from clenching too hard, not the memory of Emily crying into her pillow the night her husband walked out and left her holding the pieces, not the way Delton's words echoed things I'd once heard in courtrooms from men who wore suits and lies in equal measure. I waited until the final amen, waited until the people started filing out in slow waves, murmuring about the weather and the potluck next week like they hadn't just watched a woman shamed in front of her daughter. I didn't move. Just watched Delton walk down from the pulpit, shaking hands like nothing had happened. He didn't see me. Not yet. But he would. And when he did, he'd learn something I learned long ago. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes, silence is just aim. Emily didn't say anything in the car, just stared out the passenger window, her hand resting gently on Ella's knee in the back seat. I drove slow through town, not because of the limit, but because I needed to see it, all of it. The way Mrs. Kilpatrick, the florist, turned her face away when we passed. The way the kids on their bikes, Josh Franklin's twins, stopped pedaling just long enough to whisper something to each other, eyes flicking toward Emily and then down again. This town had always known how to smile and cut at the same time. Cedar Glen wasn't big. Population, 4,112 if you count the dogs. It was the kind of place where the grocery clerk knew your cholesterol level and your childhood nickname, where gossip moved faster than water through a cracked pipe. But this was something colder. We pulled into Emily's driveway, the paint peeling just slightly along the edge of the garage. I used to fix things like that, back when I still believed I could protect her with a hammer and a Sunday visit. She unbuckled slowly, like every movement hurt. "Thanks, Dad," she said, voice low. Ella slid out behind her, clutching a worn doll with one eye missing. Emily reached for her hand and walked up the steps like she was carrying more than just a 6-year-old. She didn't look back. I sat in the truck for a long minute, then 2, watching the wind shift the neighbor's flag, listening to the slow tick of the engine cooling. That's when I saw the note, taped to her windshield. Bright pink paper, flapping just enough to catch my eye. I got out, pulled it off, and read the words written in bold black marker. "Go back to your Sin City." No name, just the message. Meant to cut, not explain. I folded it once neatly and slid it into my pocket. Then I went back to the house and knocked. Emily answered, already pale. "Don't tell me," she said. "The note." I held up 2 fingers just above my belt line. "Second one this week?" She nodded. "First one said I'm what happens when women stop listening to their husbands." My teeth pressed together so hard I heard the hinge in my jaw pop. "I'm fine," she added quickly. "It's just words." I looked at her. Really looked. The dark under her eyes, the way her left hand kept twitching toward her chest, like she needed to hold herself together. "You're not fine," I said, "and I'm not going to pretend this is normal." She hesitated. "You can't fight the whole town." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Don't need the whole town, just the parts that rot first." She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't have to. That night, I watched her through the kitchen window. Not in a creepy way, just enough to see what I already feared. She waited until Ella was asleep, then leaned against the counter, her head bowed, shoulders shaking. I watched her cry like a soldier hiding the sound of their wounds. And I knew. This wasn't just gossip. They were erasing her. It started at school. Parents withdrawing their kids from her 2nd-grade class without so much as a phone call. One mother left a voicemail, anonymous of course, saying she didn't want her child taught by someone who couldn't keep a family together. At the grocery store, the cashier didn't bag her eggs right, on purpose, then smiled like that was somehow justice. A woman in the bakery section muttered, "Poor child," when she saw Ella, loud enough for Emily to hear, loud enough to hurt. Even the mail came later than usual. Little things, sure, but 1,000 little things can bury you just the same as one big one. I'd seen this before, not in church, but in court. Victim blaming, community smearing, the slow machinery of silence turning someone into a problem instead of a person. Emily tried to stay strong, tried to tell Ella it was just a grown-up disagreement. But one night, I found Ella hiding in my shed. "I heard Mommy crying," she whispered. "I think God's mad at her." I sat down beside her on the concrete, right there among the rakes and dust. "No," I said. "God doesn't send pain like that. People do." She blinked up at me. "But why?" I couldn't answer. Not in a way that would make sense to a 6-year-old. Not without telling her that small towns with big sermons can be cruel in the name of virtue. That night, after I put Ella to bed, Emily sat in the kitchen. I didn't speak, just sat across from her while the kettle boiled and cooled again without being poured. "Maybe I should go," she said finally. "Where?" I asked. She shrugged. "Back to Denver. Or anywhere they don't know my name." I leaned back, looked at the photos on her fridge, Ella's stick figure drawings, a coupon for 10% off oil changes, and a picture of Emily on her wedding day. She looked 20 and terrified in that photo. I remembered how she asked me, right before walking down the aisle, "Dad, what if this isn't right?" I told her to follow her gut. She didn't. Now she was paying the price. "This town used to know right from wrong," I said. "Now it only listens to a collar and a microphone." Emily said nothing, but I wasn't expecting her to. I stood slowly, took my plate to the sink and turned. "I'll be back tomorrow," I told her. "For what?" I looked her straight in the eye. "To remind them who they're really dealing with." Then I went home, pulled the old tape recorder from the garage, and set it on my workbench next to my badge, long retired but never quite buried. Because silence wasn't safety anymore, and someone had to speak a language this town would understand. The next morning, I shaved close, put on a button-down I hadn't worn since the funeral, and stepped out the door like a man heading to war. Only difference was, I didn't bring a gun. Just an old tape recorder and a lie I'd rehearsed 3 times before stepping into God's house. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the town square. The steeple caught the light first, standing there like a sword pointed skyward. If Delton had looked out the stained glass from his office, he might have seen me coming. He didn't. I walked through the side entrance. Weekday hours, no crowd, no choir. Just quiet, the kind that pretends to be holy but smells more like control. The secretary looked up, her face pinched and powdered, trying to place me. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, voice soft. "I need to confess something." That word, confess, opened doors faster than a badge ever did. She nodded quickly. "Of course. Pastor's just finishing his reading. He'll be right with you." I took a seat in the back of the sanctuary. The pew creaked beneath me. My knees ached, but I ignored them. Instead, I ran my thumb over the recorder in my coat pocket, feeling the raised edge of the record button like a trigger I hadn't pulled yet. 5 minutes later, Delton appeared. Not in robes this time, but in a gray button-up and slacks. Business casual holiness. He smiled when he saw me, wide and warm, the way you do when you smell opportunity. "Mr. Halstead," he said, extending a hand. "I didn't expect to see you so soon again." I didn't take the hand, just nodded. Need to clear something off my chest. He led me to his office. Big oak desk, leather chairs, a cross on the wall so large it felt like surveillance. I sat down, careful to keep my coat buttoned and the mic pointed forward. Delton folded his hands. Let's start with prayer. I'd rather just talk. He gave me a look, half surprise, half irritation, but nodded. What's troubling you? I leaned forward, letting my shoulders slump a little, voice low. I've been tempted, I said slowly, by a woman. Delton's eyebrows rose just enough to crack the mask. She's divorced, I added. Lives in my house. I'm ashamed to say, I sometimes think things I shouldn't. He was quiet for a moment. Then the smile returned, but it wasn't warm anymore. It was savoring. That's the devil's way, he said, using broken women to tempt men of the faith, especially older men, widowers. He was talking like he already knew the shape of this lie, like he'd delivered this diagnosis before. Go on, he encouraged. When do these thoughts come to you? At night, I said. Usually when I hear her crying. Makes me want to comfort her. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled under his chin. And what would you do in that moment if you didn't resist? I let silence hang. He filled it, just like I wanted him to. She invites it, you know. Women like that. They pretend to suffer to draw your sympathy, but in truth they thrive in chaos, in lust. They want to be fallen. It justifies their rebellion. I pressed record. He kept talking. I've counseled many men like you, good men, upright men, but once they let that kind of woman into their home, into their life, soon she's in their bed, in their church, in their soul. He smiled again, eyes glinting. And the Lord is very clear on this. Forgiveness is for the obedient. The proud deserve ruin. That line, I felt it settle into the tape like a brick dropped into still water. Delton stood and walked to the window. You want my advice? I nodded slowly. Send her away. Tell her to repent elsewhere. Her presence endangers your soul. He turned back, expecting agreement, validation. Instead, I stood, pulled my coat tighter, and offered a single word. Thanks. He nodded, pleased. I knew you'd understand. I walked out without shaking his hand, the recorder still warm in my pocket. Back in my truck, I didn't drive home right away. Just sat there, letting the recording play back once, then twice. His voice sounded even colder through the speaker, like a man reading a sentence, not scripture. That night, Emily didn't ask where I'd been, but I saw her eyes linger on the dirt smudge on my knee, left over from kneeling beside the pew. I handed her a small package. Keep this safe. Don't open it yet. She frowned. What is it? Insurance, I said. Then I opened the garage and dusted off the board I hadn't used in 15 years. Old crime scene photos, red yarn, newspaper clippings. It felt like touching a memory that still had teeth. But I knew this was no longer about one lie or one sermon. This was about power and the people Delton had crushed beneath it. As I pinned his photo to the center of the board, I thought about every man I'd put in cuffs who smiled like he was righteous. Above the photo, I wrote in thick black ink, Target number 1. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pressed stop on the tape player and whispered to no one, Forgiveness is for the obedient? Let's see how he handles obedience to the truth. I hadn't opened that side of the garage in nearly a decade. Dust clung to everything like memory, old tools, a faded license plate from my first cruiser, and the corkboard I used to build case maps on. The staples were still in it, some crooked, some rusted. They'd held the faces of killers and victims alike, and now they held one man, Pastor Delton. target number 1. I pinned his photo dead center. Beneath it, I stuck the label from the recording. 3:47 p.m. Confession session. Audio evidence, spiritual coercion, slander. Above that, I tacked a printout of a sermon transcript from 3 years back. Same rhetoric, same poison. He hadn't just gone after Emily. This was a pattern. I pulled a folding chair from the corner and sat down hard, the metal groaning under my weight. The smell of sawdust and oil filled the air. Felt good. Honest. Time to work. The town didn't want justice. It wanted control. And Delton fed that need like a man selling water in a desert he helped create. I needed proof. Not just words, not just gossip. Real hard nails through his robe. So I started with what I knew best. Records. I booted up the old laptop I used to catalog cold cases. Half the keys stuck, but it still ran. I searched the county archives. Found a complaint from 2009. Anonymous, but serious. Accusation of financial misconduct at Cedar Glen Baptist. Misuse of tithe funds. Donations unaccounted for. Status. Case closed. Insufficient evidence. The investigating officer? Chief Bradley Dyer, golf buddy of Delton's for 20 years. I'd seen them laugh at Rotary Club meetings, their wives sipping lemonade and matching floral skirts. I remember thinking, that much comfort between a cop and a preacher should make someone nervous. I pulled up tax records next. 3 properties listed under Delton's name. That didn't raise eyebrows. But one of them, a lakefront cabin 40 miles out, was paid off in full. No mortgage. Purchased in cash. Preachers don't buy lake cabins in cash. That went on the board, too. Then I dug into the police logs. Found something even better. A name. Grace Hartwell. Logged in 2012 as a pastoral dispute. No criminal charges filed. The entry was vague, just enough to hint without saying anything. But I remembered her. Used to lead the youth choir. Bright. Kind. Disappeared one summer. Rumor said she moved to care for her mother. Now I wondered what drove her out. I spent the next day calling every Hartwell listed within 200 miles. Finally found a landline in a nearby town. She picked up on the 4th ring. Grace Hartwell? Silence. Then, who's asking? This is John Halstead. I remember. Her voice was flat, guarded. I want to talk, I said. About Delton, about what happened. A long pause. I've got nothing to say about that man. I think you do. You don't know what you're getting into. Yes, I said. I do. I met her the next day. We agreed on a neutral place, an old diner on the edge of a forgotten highway. She came in late, sunglasses on, jacket zipped to the neck even though it was warm. She slid into the booth like someone expecting to be followed. You recording this? She asked. Not unless you want me to. She didn't answer, just looked at the salt shaker like it held something important. I was 24, she said finally. I believed in the work, in the message. I stayed after service one Sunday to talk through a lesson I wanted to give the teens. He said we should pray about it, in his office. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the glass of water. It wasn't prayer, she said. It was grooming. It was slow, calculated. He made me believe I was the broken one, that my past sins had attracted his attention. My fists curled under the table. And when I said no, when I finally said no and threatened to tell the elders, he told them first, said I was emotionally unstable, that I'd tried to seduce him in confession. I was gone by the end of the week. Did you file a report? She laughed, one bitter exhale. With who? The police chief? He's the one who convinced me not to go public. Said the church had already handled it. I nodded. I have a recording, I said, from yesterday, of him speaking about my daughter, comparing divorced women to poison, saying forgiveness is only for the obedient. Her eyes widened. Will you give a statement? I'm not the only one, she said. I leaned in. Then let's find them. She opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, thicker than I expected. Inside were printed emails, handwritten notes, a copy of a bank withdrawal statement with Delton's signature on it, disguised as pastoral counseling expenses, and at the bottom, a personal letter, a real one. I wrote that after I left, she said. Didn't send it, just needed it out of me. It was raw, honest, devastating. I promised her 3 things before I left. She wouldn't be alone. The story would be heard. Delton would never preach unchecked again. Back home, I added her documents to the board, drew new lines, names, faces, connections. I knew what I was building now, not just a case, a reckoning. That night, Emily came into the garage. She looked at the board, at the wall of evidence I hadn't hidden from her, at the headline I'd printed out, Grace Hartwell Speaks Out. Dad, she said quietly, don't do this. He owns this town. Then it's time someone repossessed it. She looked up at me, her eyes wet but steady. You always find the wolves, don't you? She said. No, I told her. The wolves always find me. I just stopped pretending to pray for them. I turned back to the board. The line was drawn now. Delton started this sermon, but I'd be the one to end it. Grace Hartwell lived in a small 2-bedroom off Route 19 behind a shuttered gas station and a dry cleaner that hadn't buzzed in years. The kind of place built for disappearing. One way in, curtains drawn, garden left wild. Her mailbox had no name on it, just a number and rust. I parked across the street, engine idling. Not out of hesitation, out of respect. This wasn't a woman who needed another man showing up on her porch like he had answers. But she opened the door before I could knock, like she'd felt the truck's engine from the kitchen. Or maybe she just knew I'd come back. You still want names? She asked. I want truth, I said. She nodded once and let me in. Her living room was clean but unbothered. Faded rug, old wood-burning stove, a bookshelf sagging under the weight of paperbacks and silence. A single photo on the mantel, a much younger Grace beside her father, both beaming. It was the only color in the room. She handed me a folder. Inside, typed notes, names, time frames, incidents. I've spent 10 years trying to forget all this, she said. But your daughter's face. When I saw that photo in the school newsletter last month, it hit me. He's still doing it. Worse, I said. Now he's doing it with a spotlight. She sat down across from me, arms folded tight. He told me confession was sacred, she whispered. He said speaking to him meant speaking to God. I didn't speak, just let the quiet carry her forward. He told me what we did, what he did, was holy. That women like me were called to serve through obedience. When I pushed back, he said I was possessed by pride, that it was my punishment to be shamed. She blinked hard. He said the church couldn't protect a woman who defied the word, so I left. And he got a promotion. She wasn't just telling me, she was reclaiming it. I set the folder down and met her eyes. I'm going to burn him to the ground. Grace didn't flinch. Then you need more than me. She stood, crossed the room, and pulled a cardboard box from under the couch. Inside, printed emails, some barely legible from old inkjets, others screen captured from accounts now deleted. There were notes scribbled in margins, initials circled, dates highlighted. These women won't all talk, she said. Some have kids, some left town. One drinks herself to sleep, but they're out there. I don't need them to talk, I said. Not yet. I just need to find the cracks. She hesitated, then reached into the box again and pulled out a USB drive. "On here is a recording," she said. He didn't know I hit record on the second session. It was supposed to be pastoral counseling. She said that last part like it was acid in her mouth. I kept it all these years because some part of me knew that one day someone would ask, and I wanted to be ready. I slid it into my jacket pocket. "You are." We sat in silence for a long time, just two people who knew what it meant to be unheard. As I left, she said, "If he finds out what you're doing—" "I've faced worse than words in a pulpit," I said, "and I've already outlived their fear." Back in my garage, I added her file to the board, drew red thread from her photo to 3 others I'd found in archived church newsletters, young women who had disappeared from the congregation within months of counseling sessions. I added timestamps, photos, sermons that matched the timeline. The pattern was clear. Delton didn't preach against women like Emily and Grace out of theology. He did it out of fear, because they knew what he was under the robe. The next morning, I brought the USB to an old friend, Martin Phelps, former tech forensics at the State Bureau. Now ran a computer repair shop on Main, buried behind stacks of junk towers and motherboards nobody remembered how to fix. "You didn't get this legally, did you?" he asked, holding the drive. "I got it righteously." He grinned. "That's worse." But he plugged it in, cleaned the audio, extracted the metadata. By the time he was done, we had a pristine WAV file, time-stamped, labeled. I burned a copy to a fresh drive, wrote 2 words on the label, "For release." Then I made a list: the women, the emails, the offering plate. Because if Delton had used the pulpit as a weapon, then I was going to use everything he touched to dismantle him. Grace called that night. "I spoke to one of the others," she said. "She's scared, but she said if someone else goes first." "She doesn't have to go first," I said. "You already did." Grace was quiet for a moment. "You really think this town will believe me?" "No," I said. "I think they'll hear you. And that's all we need to start." I didn't ask her to speak at the church. Not yet. That time would come. For now, I needed her strength to steady the ground. That Sunday, Emily came over, brought Ella. We had dinner. Nothing fancy: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from a can. But it felt like the first normal meal we'd shared in months. After Ella was in bed, Emily sat with me on the porch. "You've been quieter than usual," she said. "I've been listening," I told her, "to things this town forgot to hear." She looked at me sideways. "And what happens if the town turns on you too?" I lit a cigarette, watched the ember glow. "Then I remind them who I was before they forgot." She smiled softly. "You always knew it would come to this." "No," I said, "but I always knew what I'd do when it did." In the garage, the warboard was nearly full, but one string was still missing: the money. That was next. I went inside and placed Grace's USB in a fireproof lockbox. Then I opened an envelope labeled Operation Offering, because it was time to follow the paper trail back to the pulpit. Sunday morning, I shaved close again. Same shirt, same seat in the back pew, same calm expression, like I was just another retiree doing his weekly due. Only this time, I brought something new with me: an envelope. Inside, 5 $100 bills, each one marked. The kind of marks the IRS trained me to track back when I was moonlighting as a fraud investigator before homicide pulled me full-time. UV pen, tiny dots in the serial corners, invisible to the naked eye but clear under blue light. Church was packed. Word of Delton's powerful new series on obedience had filled the pews with folks itching to nod along. The louder he got, the more they smiled. Like watching someone else get flayed was food for the soul. The offering plate came around, polished oak lined in velvet. I dropped the envelope in without blinking. One row ahead, I watched Deacon Paul nod approvingly. He'd counted that plate every week for 20 years. Eyes sharp, ears sharper, but not sharp enough to know he was about to choke on his own silence. After service, I didn't leave. Instead, I walked the long way around to the office door, knocked twice. "Pastor's busy," the secretary said. "That's fine. Just tell him a donation's about to come back to haunt him." I didn't wait for her to respond. Back home, I dialed an old contact at the IRS. Name's Veronica Shaw. We worked 2 cases together back in '98. Both ended with jail time and a golf course-sized seizure. She picked up after 2 rings. "Halstead," she said. "Either someone died or someone's stealing again." "Both," I said. "But I'm only interested in the second part today." I gave her the name, the church, the rough timeline, the old reports I'd found. She listened without interruption, then let out a long, sharp whistle. "And you're saying there's current movement?" "Marked bills in the plate this morning. I want to know where they go." "You want this quiet or loud?" "Start quiet," I said, "but leave the fuse exposed." She laughed. "You're lucky I'm bored." We agreed. She'd send a routine audit request to the Cedar Glen Baptist Church. Under the radar, no news coverage, no panic. Just a letter and a surprise visit a week later. The moment those bills moved from the plate to a shell account, we'd have a wire trail. But I didn't stop there. 2 nights later, I mailed a small brown box to the Church Oversight Council in Atlanta. Inside, a flash drive with Grace's testimony, 3 anonymous statements from former church staff, each gathered by Grace herself, and a copy of the offering schedule with matching bank deposits that didn't align. I didn't sign the letter, just attached a sticky note that read, "God sees, so does the law." Another package went to Channel 8 News, small town, big signal. I chose them for one reason. The anchor, Melissa Cho, once exposed a police cover-up in Barton County and nearly lost her job for it. She wouldn't flinch at a preacher. That one I signed. Just a name. No title. John Halstead. 2 days later, I received a text from Grace. The council replied. They're reviewing the materials. Quietly, but they used the word grave. That same evening, I stood in the back of the sanctuary again, this time for a Wednesday night prayer session. Delton wasn't preaching. He was talking. Casual. Light. Telling the room about how the enemy comes in subtle forms, and how those who question authority are often the first to fall from grace. He wasn't talking to the room. He was talking to me. I didn't move. I wanted him to see me. He did. And for the first time, he hesitated between words. A flicker. Not fear. Not yet. But awareness. The kind that shows up when a man realizes he's no longer alone in the room. That night, Emily found me in the garage. "You're mailing things now?" she asked, holding up one of the return address labels I'd left by mistake. "Yes." "To who?" "Everyone who forgot what justice smells like." She looked at the board, the pins, the threads. "You think the money trail will matter more than the women?" "No," I said. "But money's the only language his friends understand. You shake their purse, they forget their pew." She sat down next to me on the workbench. "Ella asked if God hates you," she said. "Why?" "She heard someone at school say you were attacking the church." I looked at the board again, at Delton's face. "Tell her this," I said. "God doesn't hate me. He just got tired of waiting." The next morning, Channel 8 News ran a teaser for an upcoming segment. Holy donations, Cedar Glen Baptist faces audit amid allegations. Delton didn't respond, not publicly, But that Friday, a letter went out to the congregation. Emily got one in her mailbox. So did Grace, even though she hadn't been a member in 10 years. It read, "We are under spiritual attack. Stay faithful. Stay vigilant. The enemy hides in the familiar." He signed it with a flourish. Pastor Delton. But he was already unraveling. That Sunday, the plate passed lighter. Fewer bills, more coins, whispers in the back pews, eyes shifting. I sat through the entire service, unmoving. When it ended, I stood slowly, walked to the front, and looked him in the eye as he shook hands with the faithful. He didn't flinch, but his grip faltered. 2 IRS agents were already assigned. The council had called a special meeting, and Channel 8 had moved their story to prime time. He was still preaching, but I was done listening. Now it was his turn. There was a storm on the radar that Sunday morning, but it hadn't touched the sky yet. Not the one outside anyway. Inside Cedar Glen Baptist, the storm was already forming, in side eyes, quiet rustling, and one very specific manila envelope tucked under my coat. Emily didn't come that morning. She stayed home with Ella, who'd caught a cold or faked one well enough to convince her mother. Either way, I was glad. This was going to be loud. Delton's sermon series was supposed to conclude that day. The path of obedience. Flyers were everywhere. A digital countdown on the church's Facebook page ticked down the seconds like it was a rock concert, not a sermon. He even had a guest pianist. Presentation mattered when truth was bleeding through the walls. The sanctuary was full. People dressed nicer, more makeup, more perfume, like they were trying to look clean enough to drown out the smell of something rotting. I didn't wear a suit. Didn't need armor when you brought thunder. At 10:01 a.m., the doors opened. 2 men stepped inside. Suits, government-issued expressions. IRS. They didn't speak. Just walked to the side aisle, stood, and waited. Delton saw them immediately. His rhythm stuttered, just for a beat, but he recovered fast. "Brothers and sisters," he said, smiling wide, "we are joined today by visitors. God sends them for a reason." He didn't name them. He didn't need to. That was strike 1. Strike 2 was waiting in the back pew. Melissa Cho, Channel 8 anchor, dressed in denim and holding a discreet handheld camera. She wasn't hiding. She wanted him to know. The piano played soft. Delton stepped up to the pulpit, Bible under his arm like a prop more than a weapon now. But he had barely cleared his throat when it started. A sound, low at first, then rising, not shouting, not singing, a recording, my recording, his voice clear over the speakers. "Forgiveness is for the obedient. The proud deserve ruin." It echoed through the sanctuary like lightning cracking the ceiling. People froze. The pianist stopped playing. One woman gasped. A man dropped his bulletin. Somewhere a child asked, "Is that pastor?" Delton's face went pale. He raised a hand. This is a manipulation." But then the voice continued. Another clip. "She invites it, you know. Women like that. They pretend to suffer." Delton slammed the pulpit. That's enough. But it wasn't his church anymore. Not that morning. The sound system cut. The room fell into a stunned silence. Then the doors opened again. 3 women stepped in. First, Grace. Behind her, Marcy Tolan, former youth choir director, and Dina Monroe, a name I hadn't heard in over a decade, but I remembered her eyes from old photos Grace gave me. They didn't shout, didn't wave signs. They walked, heads held high, to the front pew and sat. Delton stared at them like they were ghosts. The IRS agent stepped forward. "We'd like to speak with you privately after the service," one said. Melissa Cho stood. "Pastor Delton, Would you like to respond to the audio that aired this morning on our 8 a.m. broadcast? She held up her press badge. Half the congregation turned in their seats like they were watching a courtroom. Delton didn't answer. He turned to Deacon Paul. "Turn off the mics. Shut the system down." But Paul just stood there, didn't move, didn't blink. And for the first time, Delton looked alone. He opened his Bible, fumbled a page, tried to speak. Nothing came out. Then Grace stood. She didn't raise her voice, didn't make a speech, just said one sentence. "You used God to cover your shame." A murmur spread like wind through wheat. Someone near the back, someone I couldn't see, started humming a hymn. Soft, low. Others joined. Delton slammed his Bible shut and walked off the stage. He didn't finish his sermon. He didn't bless the congregation. He walked out the side door and didn't look back. The storm finally hit outside. Rain hammered the roof. Thunder rolled in the distance. But inside, it was quiet, peaceful, like the first deep breath after pulling someone out of water. Grace turned toward me. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Emily texted me minutes later. "Was it enough?" I replied, "He walked off stage. IRS is with him now." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next day, a formal statement from the Church Oversight Council was posted to their website. "Pastor Delton has been placed on administrative leave pending financial and ethical review. We are cooperating with authorities." Strike 3. And it wasn't over. But something had broken. And this time, it wasn't us. By Monday morning, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. The local diner played Channel 8 on mute, but the footage of Delton's walk-off looped every half hour. A still shot of him frozen mid-turn, jaw tight, Bible clutched to his side like a life vest. The captions were clear enough. IRS investigates Cedar Glen pastor. 3 women come forward, and that was just the start. The church marquee still read, "Obedience Week 4, even as 3 members of the board stepped down." A letter from Deacon Paul circulated quietly, full of vague admissions and one heavy line. "I can no longer, in good conscience, serve a house that burns its wounded." By Wednesday, Delton's face had disappeared from the church website. Just a stock photo of folded hands and a statement under review. But the real statement came Sunday. I sat in my usual pew again. This time it wasn't cold. Emily sat beside me. She hadn't planned on coming, but Ella asked if she could wear the yellow dress again, the one she wore the last time they were here, like she wanted to reclaim it. Emily's hand trembled just once as we stepped in, but she didn't let go of her daughter. The pulpit was empty, not because there was no one to speak, but because the sanctuary needed silence more than another sermon. Then Grace walked in. She wasn't alone. 2 other women followed. Not Dina or Marcy, others. One with gray streaks in her hair, another with her son beside her. Every eye followed them as they walked to the front. No music, no preamble. Grace stepped onto the stage. She stood behind the same pulpit Delton had ruled from. She touched its edge, not reverently, but carefully, like it might still bite. Then she spoke. "My name is Grace Hartwell. I led this church's youth choir until 2012. Some of you remember me. Some of you knew why I left. Most of you were told not to ask." Silence. She continued. "I came here today not for revenge, not to reclaim anything, but to say that I'm still standing." Her voice was steady, not loud, but every word landed like a drumbeat in the ribs. I was used, I was lied to, and when I tried to speak, I was erased. But I survived, and I'm not the only one. She looked at the other 2 women, then back at the congregation. I forgive the ones who didn't know. I have nothing left for the ones who did and did nothing. Someone in the back began to cry. not loudly, but raw. Grace placed a single sheet of paper on the pulpit and stepped down. That was it. No applause, no choir, just quiet, the kind that changes a room. Outside, the sheriff's car was parked near the church steps, not because anyone had called them, but because the pastor had been served a subpoena. When Delton came out, escorted by 2 plainclothes agents, he didn't look angry. He looked hollow, like something had left him, or maybe something had finally settled in. There were no handcuffs. Not yet. But it didn't matter, because the walk down those steps wasn't a sermon. It was a reckoning. Emily watched from beside me, hand over Ella's shoulder. When Delton passed us, she didn't speak, didn't blink, but Ella did. She looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is Mommy safe now?" I nodded once. "She is." That night, we didn't talk about it. We had dinner. We laughed when Ella made mashed potato mountains and demanded we take cover from the gravy lava. Emily smiled, not the strained kind, the real kind, the one I hadn't seen in months. Later, she walked onto the porch where I sat with a coffee gone cold. "He's really done?" she asked. "He's finished," I said. "Even if the courts don't get him, the people finally saw him." "And they believed it?" "Enough of them did." She leaned against the rail. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't." I handed her a folder. She opened it slowly. Her brows furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "Property transfer," she said. I nodded. "You're the owner now. House is yours outright." She blinked. "Why?" "Because this fight's not over. Just mine is. Now it's yours." "I'm not like you." "No," I said. "You're better." She hugged me for the first time in a long time. Not quick, not polite. Long enough for both of us to let something go. Inside, Ella laughed as a cartoon played too loud. The town wasn't healed, but the wound had been named, and that was something. That was everything. The first thing to come back was the silence. Not the suffocating kind, like the weeks after the sermon that turned the town sideways, but the slow hush that settles over a place unsure whether to rebuild or retreat. Cedar Glen didn't know how to process what it had witnessed. So, it did what most small towns do when they don't want to admit they were wrong. It got real polite. "Morning, Miss Emily," the cashier said now, her voice all syrup. No more muttering, no more dropped eggs, no more notes on her windshield. Instead, she got extra coupons and a compliment on her earrings. It wasn't redemption. It was guilt in a floral dress. But Emily didn't flinch. She smiled, took her groceries, walked past the same bulletin board that once pinned a flyer shaming her, now covered with bake sales and job listings. She came over that afternoon and found me in the backyard, fixing the fence I'd meant to replace 5 years ago. "I got a letter," she said. I stood, wiping my hands on my jeans. "From who?" "The school board. They want me back. Said there was overwhelming support from the parent body." "You gonna take it?" She nodded, slow but steady. "I taught kids, Dad. I never stopped being that." "Then remind them who you are." She did. Monday morning, she walked through these school doors in the same dress she wore her first year on the job. She didn't try to blend in, didn't try to disappear, just showed up, fully, finally. That same day, Grace's story aired on Channel 8 in full, a 30-minute special titled "The Woman Who Wasn't Silent." They ran footage from her speech, pieces of the audio, the parts legally cleared, and clips of the other women who had come forward. It was unflinching, it was human, and it was enough to make the state board open a formal inquiry. Grace didn't hide afterward. She didn't move away. She stayed, joined the women's support group in town, spoke at a youth seminar, declined a book deal but offered to mentor anyone walking through the wreckage of their own shame. Some folks still didn't speak to her. Some never would. But others started inviting her over for coffee, for pie, for company. Because after someone tells the truth that loud, pretending they never existed, gets harder. One afternoon, I found Emily sitting on the porch with a few of the town's younger mothers. They were laughing, holding coffee cups, watching their kids run through the front yard like the grass had never known pain. When I walked up, one of the women stood. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said to Emily. "I didn't know what to do back then, but thank you for standing back up." Emily nodded. "We all fall. It's what you do after." She looked over at me, then back at them. "I had help," she added. Later that night we sat on my porch, watching the sun fade. "You always knew it would work out?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I knew silence had run its course." She sipped her tea, then quietly, "I think I want to run for the school board." I didn't laugh, didn't even smile, just nodded. "Good," I said. "Fight from the front this time." That night I opened the old war board one last time, unpinned Delton's photo, took down the red thread, left Grace's. Not because the case was still open, but because some faces deserved to stay. Before bed I wrote one last note. If truth is a fire, then silence is kindling. Burn carefully, but burn. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. Emily was the one carrying the torch now. The new pastor didn't speak much. Young, maybe early 30s, clean cut, no rings, voice softer than most men who take a pulpit. He didn't perform his sermons. He shared them. Like someone who'd learned that volume doesn't make truth heavier. His first Sunday, he didn't wear robes, just a white shirt and slacks, sleeves rolled up to the forearms like he'd been working in the garden before stepping behind the pulpit. I didn't sit inside that day. I stood outside, leaning against the hood of my truck, coffee in hand, the church bell tolling like it always had. But quieter now. Like it, too, understood the cost of speaking too loudly without listening. I watched the people walk in, saw familiar faces, some smiling, some not. Emily held Ella's hand, both in floral dresses. Ella ran ahead for a moment, spinning in the grass before the steps like she was chasing the sun. Grace walked in too, waved toward me from the sidewalk. Didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Inside, they said a new kind of prayer, one that asked more questions than it answered, one that didn't smell like shame wrapped in scripture. That was enough. For now. After the service, Emily stepped out with Ella still spinning in circles around her like a little planet orbiting safety. They walked toward me, slow, like they weren't afraid to be seen anymore. Ella ran ahead. "Grandpa, did you hear the new song?" "Not yet," I said, but I heard the silence before it. She grinned and twirled once, then darted back toward the swings behind the church. Emily stopped beside me. "Better?" she asked. "Different," I said. "Better's gonna take time." She nodded. "You still miss the fight?" I looked out at the town, at the street where I used to watch people cross when they thought no one noticed, at the grocery store where Emily once cried behind the dairy section, at the front porch I rebuilt 4 times just to give her a place to sit that didn't sag. "I don't believe in revenge," I said finally. Emily raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "No," I added. "I believe in records." She smiled at that. "Records last longer than sermons." I handed her a second manila folder, lighter than the first. "What's this?" "Notes," I said. "Names, faces, people who look the other way. I don't need them anymore, but you might." She looked at it, then back at me. "You're really done?" I lit a cigarette, inhaled once, let it curl into the air like breath exhaled after holding it too long. I think this town just corrected its record. Emily didn't say anything. She just looked out at the steeple, the swing set, her daughter in the sunlight. Then she walked forward to join her. I stayed behind, not because I wasn't welcome, but because some things aren't meant to be followed. Some endings don't need applause, only acknowledgement, only peace. I finished the coffee, tossed the cigarette. The bells rang again, and for the first time in a long while they sounded like grace, not judgment. The town would forget some of it. It always did. But not her, not Grace, not Ella, spinning barefoot in the grass, and not me. I stepped into my truck, started the engine, didn't drive away just yet, just sat there for a while longer, listening to the bells, to the quiet, to a town that had finally run out of excuses.